Welcome back everyone. Today we are going to be adding the ability to shoot guns in our game. So now let's get started. First I'm going to import a bunch of gun models from an asset that I have. There will be a link in the description to download it. However, I already have it downloaded. The asset is called Gun Pack Low Polygons Collection, and you can find this on the asset store. So now I'm going to import it. And then let's just wait for this to import. Then there may be a few things, a few warnings, you can just ignore them. And now in our scripts, let's create 3 new scripts. We're going to call it gun data, oops, let that compile, firing mode, and yeah, then finally we're going to create one more script called gun shoot. So these 3 scripts will help us will give us the ability to shoot guns. So now let's open up our IDE and we'll start on it. Once you've opened up your IDE, let's go into our gun data script. Delete everything inside the class. This is not going to be a mono behavior component, but this is going to be a scriptable object. This is going to hold all the data for our guns, and this will allow us to create many different types of guns with different settings to add variety. So the first thing we should do is we're going to add the attribute above our gun data class called create asset menu, and we'll set our file name equal to gun, and our menu name is going to equal item. Now this will just basically allow us to create these data containers, or scriptable objects in the editor. So that'll make it much easier to store them. So now let's add in a few properties for our gun. So we're gonna first add a float for our range, how far we can shoot, a firing mode, and we're gonna work on this very soon, a fire rate, and this is just gonna tell us if we have an automatic, if our gun's gonna be automatic, how many seconds should it take for a bullet to be fired. And then finally we'll have our game object for our hit decal, and this is gonna be used for if we hit something, we're gonna spawn this at the position where we hit something when we shoot. So now let's go into our firing mode, and again we'll delete everything inside. And then this isn't going to be a class, but we're going to make this an enum. And then just delete that. And this is just going to have our 2 firing modes, semi-auto, if I can spell that right, and auto. And then we can easily set that in our scriptable object. So now that we've finished those 2 scripts, let's go into our gun shoot class, and this is going to handle all the logic for shooting. So let's first create a method called shoot, and in this method we're going to actually handle the logic for our shooting, and we're going to be using something called a Raycast. Now I'm going to open up Paint and we're going to draw it. So let's say we have a player right here, or we have an object rather, a Raycast, and let's say this entire white space, it's our space. So a Raycast is basically gonna cast a ray from a point for a certain amount of distance, and let's say there's an object in between, or let's, if I can pick excuse me, yeah, so let's say that this object, there's assuming this is a 3D space, let's say that we raycast and then this ray intersects this object. Well, we can use Unity allows us to get information about where we hit, what our raycast hit, and using this raycast we can handle shooting by with our bullet just being spawned, or our bullet being just a ray being shot, and we're checking if we hit something. So now that we know what a raycast is, let's implement it. So first, there are multiple different ways to do a raycast. However, what we're going to do is we're going to create an array. An array, it can just be used to do a raycast. So we can create a variable called ray that's of type ray, which is a struct in Unity, and we can call camera, and we'll set it equal to camera.main.screen point to ray, and then we'll pass in a new vector3 of our screen.width divided by 2, our screen.height divided by 2, and then 0f. Now what this does is this will create a ray, or cast a ray. It won't cast a ray. It'll create a ray from the center of our screen. So that's why we use the function screen point to ray, and then it creates a ray from our screen point, and we can add a crosshair to the center of our screen later to make it look nice. So now that we've created our array, let's actually handle the logic. So we want to first check if we actually hit something with that ray. So we can call if physics.raycast, and then we can pass in our array. Then if let's say, assuming we hit something, this variable our out variable is going to be a raycast hit. Our raycast hit stores information about where we hit, or what position we hit, what transform we hit, and so on. And then finally we have to pass in the range, and we can pass in our gun data.range. Yep, hang on, it's weird. Oh, and I forgot to. We have to actually add a reference to our gun data up here. My bad. So now that we do that, so if we hit something, we want to spawn our hit decal. So we can say game object decal, and then we'll set it equal to instantiate gun data dot hit decal, and then we'll say hit dot point, and hit dot point is where our ray actually hit, like the actual position we hit. And then we can pass in quaternion.identity, which is just our regular rotation. And then after that, we can we don't want to keep having decal. We want it to be destroyed eventually. So we'll just call destroy decal. Oops, I just realized that put that variable as deal, not decal. And then after that, if we want to destroy it after a certain number of time, we can just say 3 seconds. So that's our shoot function. So now what we need to do is we need to actually listen for our user input to handle shooting, and we also have to handle it based on our firing mode, because if it's semi-auto, every time we click our left mouse button, one bullet will be shot. But if we hold it down, it'll only shoot once. But with auto, it'll shoot multiple bullets. So we need to handle that. So first, let's handle if it's semi-auto. So we can do if gun data firing mode equals firing mode dot semi-auto. Sorry about that. OBS, and then we can do if input dot get button down, and what that does is waits till the end of the frame for our button, or it checks if our button was pressed during the current frame, and then we can do fire 1, and then if it was, we'll just shoot. And then otherwise, if our gun data, the firing mode isn't semi-auto but it's auto, then let's copy and paste this actually, but instead of calling shoot, we're gonna call a function called Invoke Repeating. Now what Invoke Repeating does is it continuously calls the shoot function multiple times. It's kind of like a loop, but it's just calling it infinitely, but with a slight delay in the call at which we can set, and then we can also cancel it if we want to. So as long as we're holding our button down, if we hold our button down, we want to call this invoke repeating function only once. So that's why we use get button down here again. So we'll say invoke repeating name of our shoot function, and then we'll pass in 0 up because this is just the delay before it actually starts invoking our method multiple times, and then after that it's just gonna be, we're gonna put in our fire rate for how often it invokes it, or the time between each invoke of the method. If I can fire rate, and then that's all good. But let's say we lift up our button. How do we want to cancel it? So we need to handle that as well. So we can do else if input dot get button up, and then fire 1. Now if that means that if we let go in that frame, we have to cancel it, and we can just use the function called cancel invoke, and then pass in the method to cancel. And that's it for our shooting. So now let's head back into Unity. Once you're back in Unity, let's create a prefabs folder. See if I can do that. We can store we'll store all the different guns and other parts of our game in here. So now let's make our player a prefab, just so if we want to add a different scene later, we can. So now let's create an empty game object, and we'll call this our gun number 1. And then we can pick a model from here, and I'm just going to use the first one. So as you can see, we have this is our first model, and the asset I'm using gives us materials as well, so we can just add that on there. Now what we can do here is, what we have to do is we have to add a component, our gun shoot component on here, and then our gun data. We have to create this, but we'll do that in a second, because we want to, in order to make our game feel first person, we have to move. We're gonna make our gun a child of our player. However, we want to make it a child of our main camera, just so when we move down, our gun also moves down with it. Next, we're gonna create it. Before we do that, we're gonna create an empty game object called gun holder, and this is so in case we want to switch it out. We're gonna eventually add gun switching and stuff. So we're gonna do that, and then we can just make our gun a child, and we'll also make it our gun also a prefab as well. It's just so yeah. So now we can let's reset the position, and then I'm gonna alter it a little bit, and I'm also gonna make the scaling. I'm gonna scale it by 5. However, feel free to experiment around with this, but I'm just gonna do that. So yeah, yep. And then let's create a canvas now, and this is so we can have a crosshair. So we'll create a canvas, and then we're gonna create a UI, an image, and then we're gonna set the scale to 0.1 by 0.1 by 0.1, and then since we can't really see it, so we can change the color as well. And I'm gonna do blue since it makes it easier to see. However, feel free to pick whichever color you want. So then we've done that. So this is at the center of our screen, and we wrote the code so that a ray is cast from the center of our screen, so it'll work. But before we do that, we need to actually create one more thing, which is gonna be our decal or our hit prefab. So let's create a 3D object, and this is gonna be temporary, but I'm just gonna create a sphere. Oops, yeah, sphere, and I'm gonna scale it by 0.3, 0.3, and 0.3, and then I'm gonna create in our materials folder. I'm gonna create a new material, and I'll call it mat_decal, and I'll change the color to brown, or yeah, I'll change it to slightly brown color, and then I'll apply it. Then I'll rename this to decal. Then we can make it a prefab as well. So yeah, and then we can just delete this. Next, what we can do is we have to create our actual gun scriptable object. So first I'm going to create a folder. I'll call it gun scriptables, or actually I'll just call it scriptables. And then if I didn't spell that right. And then we can create a scriptable object, and then item, we'll create that, and we'll call it gun1. And then I'm gonna put, for the range, I'm going to do 10. This is gonna be an automatic, so I'm gonna create an automatic gun. I'll put our fire rate to be 0.25 seconds, so since it's auto. And then our prefab, for our decal, we just created that, so we can do that. Put that in there. And then in our gun, we have to finally put that there. Or oops, we have to put our scriptable object in there, so we can do that. And now if we hit run, we can run it. We can if we click once, we spawn these and they slowly disappear. And if we keep holding down, they keep spawning. And yeah, and that's it for this video. In the next video, we're gonna handle things like multiple guns. In the future, we're gonna handle multiple guns, ammo, and all that. But this was just getting us quickly set up. So I'll see you in the next tutorial. Peace.